Welcome to Journey Through the Gate, your paranormal portal podcast, as we delve into the many questions and wonders brought on by the supernatural experience. What's on the other side of the gate? Let's find out together. Welcome to Journey Through the Gate, and tonight we have a little paranormal royalty with us. As far as I'm concerned, he is all about the paranormal for me. So to get the mood a little set and to kind of give you an idea where we're going here, I wanted to read just a little thing that you might recognize. We cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. Now, if that sounds familiar, Abraham Lincoln, November 19th, 1863. Now, that's just a little something to remind you that what we're going to talk about tonight was one of the bloodiest battles ever fought on American soil. These were men. These were human beings. They were young, they were old, they were fighting for whatever reason made them sign up, because there was nothing else they could do, because they were fighting for their rights, because they felt like they had to, because it was their duty. And some of them are still fighting. The gentleman I have on tonight is one of the foremost authorities on Gettysburg. He is an author. He is a paranormal investigator. He is the founder of one of the first ghost hunting tours, and in my opinion, one of the classiest, and that's Candlelight Ghost Hunting Tours in Gettysburg. Tonight, please welcome Mr. Mark Nesbitt. Thank you, Mark.
Well, thank you, Sysco. That's a very nice introduction there. I appreciate that. And
I almost cried. I got to be honest.
Well, yeah, to the point that what you read there of the Gettysburg Address is pretty much sums up the the aftermath of the battle, and what Lincoln, of course, was trying to do was not only dedicate the National Cemetery there, but he took the opportunity to try and rededicate the nation to the cause of the Civil War, the northern cause of the Civil War, which was to end slavery and reunite the country. So I like that intro very much.
Well, thank you. And that's kind of where I'm sitting with this, because you cannot pick up one of your books, and one of my favorite was the journal of
35 Days to Gettysburg.
Oh gosh, yeah. Because you're getting it from their perspective, and you're getting it in their words. And I read that several times because I've gone to Gettysburg, but my reason for going many times is not even on my own. It's just, I want to go, and if I could get somebody to listen, I just wanted to tell them, hey, you're not forgotten, and your fight is over. And, it's like... It seems like we've forgotten that ghosts were human beings, if you get my point. And it's,
oh yeah.
And you're talking 150, now we're what, at 154 or something like that, years.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're still in a lot of respect. Of course, some are residual and some is just echoes of the past and some are just imprints. We get that. But the ones that are there and intelligent hauntings, which you've bumped into multiple, some of them don't even realize they're dead, and they're still caught up. They're still caught up. And then to go in there, you can imagine, and of course I'm telling you things you already know, but to go in there and watch, hour by hour, probably, I don't know how many different ghost tours going through the battle, and then having groups of people that are carrying themselves different, they're speaking different, of all this equipment, it just seems crazy to me to then add on, impertinent questions like, what was a war like? And how's it feel to be shot? And then they wonder why they're getting either slapped or or nothing at all. They're not getting any result whatsoever. And you have a different approach to that. You want to tell us a little bit about that? I mean, even with the cookies, I thought that was just wonderful. Respect.
Well, that's the whole point. I mean, you have to imagine yourself. If these spirits live in another dimension or another, I'll call it heaven or nirvana or whatever you want to call it. I kind of think it's sort of like sitting in your favorite house, in your own house, in your living room, in your favorite, most comfortable chair. All of a sudden, you hear somebody kick in the door, and they're smoking a cigarette, and they're yelling, "Does anybody here want to talk to me?" I mean, you would be like, no, I don't want to talk to you. Mm-hmm. We have, and not to mention the fact that with all the equipment that's available now, it seems kind of silly to go into a haunted area with like an EMF meter, wander around attempting to bump into a ghost, when we know very well that they have a virtually unbelievable mode of travel. They can go anywhere they want. They're not bound by this physical body anymore. And so they can come to you, and we have done this in a number of places, and we call it the intuitive method. In other words, we're all a little bit psychic. We need to develop that more. We used to be, when we were children, very psychic. That's been drummed out of us.
Yes.
But we need to get back to that, the feeling of where there might be spiritual energy. And I do mean energy. I mean physical, scientific energy that we can follow our feelings towards, and then communicate, as you were saying, on a more human level, rather than just provoking or trying to get somebody mad at you so they'll strike out at you. This makes much more sense to me when you're doing a paranormal investigation.
Absolutely, and with myself too. And I know from reading your books and listening to interviews and speaking to you in person, you kind of feel the same way as, this is a human being you're talking to. Not only are you speaking to a human being, but for people that don't know, tell us a little bit about what that time was like. I mean, husband and wife would go into town and they wouldn't even call each other by their first name. It'd be Mr. and Mrs. Smith or Mr. and Mrs. Robinson. They had their religious beliefs were very black and white. So there you got your fear base, which is probably why a lot of them didn't cross, other than just the being dead so quickly and, the circumstances. But tell us a little bit about that time.
Well, it's called the Victorian era, excuse me, and named after Queen Victoria. A little, we have a tendency to think that it's, and probably truly that it was a little more formal. As you say, people would refer to their spouses as Mr. or Mrs. when they went out in public. It was a little more formal society back in those days, and so that's why it's kind of important when you're addressing these people that you're not talking to criminals. You're not in a setting like a prison or a penitentiary. You're in their homes in many cases. For example, in our building where we run the Ghosts of Gettysburg tours on 271 Baltimore Street there in Gettysburg, it was a Civil War house, and the one family lived there from 1866 till 1914. So they owned the place the longest. Well, this is Kitzmiller. It's still there. I mean, she's a very, very active spirit in our building. We communicate with her. She communicates back with us, and many times is not pleased with what we're doing. It lets us know. But and so we have done several things to alleviate her concerns, and so and we get along now. And it's but that's it's her house too, is the way I look at it. I just happen to be paying the mortgage at this particular stage of the game, but she owns that house as much as I do. Although when there's problems, a leak or something, I hear from my mediums that she wants me to take care of it. You know what I mean? So she gets on my case.
That's so funny. And it's just, time is just a relative thing. You know, it just seems like layers, almost like pages in a book. You know what I mean? It's like that land was there. And then everything that happened on that in that same spot. And it's almost just like layers in time. And sometimes they mesh, you know, or one crosses over into the next almost. It's amazing. And I totally agree about, you know, the energy. And, you know, we've learned, you also said in one of your books about how much has paranormal investigation changed and what have we learned, you know, to keep going back into a place where you know there's activity. And boy, is there activity in Gettysburg. But to go in there to prove that there's a ghost there is kind of like, to me, like going into a bar to prove there's beer.
Right, yeah. Right, you don't need to, you know, that's so many times. I think a lot of the, for example, especially the places or the programs on TV now, they want proof that there are ghosts. And we know that there are. We don't need to prove that. In fact, my next book coming out probably the beginning of July, Ghosts of Gettysburg 8, I address it, not as deeply as I would like to, but I address both time and its effects, and also the fact that you know, we know that ghosts exist. We don't need to know that anymore. What we need to do is perfect our communication with them and let them tell us what they know of the rest of existence, not just this existence, but the rest of it that we all are headed towards eventually. So that's I think my next step is where I'm headed.
Also, yeah, and I think that's wonderful. And something I'm very interested in too is ghost prevention. And I know that sounds so funny, but I have people ask me all the time, well, you know, what makes a ghost stay? Or, you know, free will. Did they choose not to cross over, and why? You know, or if you can get it to the point where they do know they're dead and they do know that they made a choice, what made them stop? And it seems like number one is fear of the other side. You know, I did this, I did that. I don't want, you know, I don't want to cross over. Or, you know, they always say like unfinished business, or I want to contact this one or that one. And when you're standing there talking to a soldier on a battlefield that, you know, it's 154 years, the people that they want to see are no longer there. They're on the other side. So if we could get them to go over there, you know, that kind of thing, you know. Okay, so I know you've been doing this a long time, and I know you have some fantastic stories. And I'm not going to ask you the typical question, what's the scariest thing you ever saw? Because I know you, and I know that things they intrigue you more than scare you. Like, what was that? Let me go see what that is, which is, you know, it's just a persona that you've fallen into. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think the fascination.
Yep.
And the inquisitiveness in me, I think, it outweighs any fear. I mean, yeah, you get the heebie-jeebies, you get the willies in certain situations. But like I always say, you know, we have in the group that I'm with, when you're at a dark place and the door slams, you run towards it to find out what it was.
What is that?
And to debunk whatever it was. You know what I mean?
Right. You know, one of the... Not to cut you off, but I got to get you to tell me about the bloodstains, because I thought that was so cool. There's so much in that really gives us a lot of perspective on. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah.
Do you mind telling that?
That was, excuse me, not at all. That was, I can't classify that as one of the scariest things that ever happened to me, although retrospectively, yeah, it is kind of scary. But it was definitely one of the weirdest things that ever happened to me. And I've had some pretty weird things happen on our investigations. But I wasn't even on a formal investigation. There's a farm not too far from the downtown of Gettysburg, a couple miles outside of town, called the Daniel Lady Farm. It was a hospital used at the time of it was a farm that was used as a hospital at the time of the battle. And the front room had the southern exposure, not to mention the fact that it had blood stains from the battle that just wouldn't come out of the wooden floor. And so the organization that purchased it to preserve it, the Gettysburg Battlefield Preservation Association, renovated the place. And it was being used as kind of a semi-working farm. They had a caretaker out there who worked the fields and just watched over the place. So I got a phone call from him one day, and he said, "Mark, if you want to see a paranormal thing happening right before your eyes, come on out to the lady farm." I said, "Oh, geez, I can't pass that up, can I?" So I threw all the gear in the van and went out there. And I had my video camera going as soon as I walked up to the door. And I knocked on the door, and I'm thinking, what's going to happen? Is something going to fly out at me or what? Mm-hmm. And he opened the door, and he said, "I don't want to say anything. I just want you to know a couple things, that we had cleaned this place beautifully because we had a tour the other day of Confederate soldiers, and we brought them into the front room here, which was the operating room." He said, "And then this morning," that was yesterday, "then this morning we went in and we found this." And he opened the door, we walked in, and there, on this wooden floor, were streams of a rust-colored liquid. There were droplets of this liquid, and it was crystallizing inside the droplets. And on the edges, it seemed to be a clear serum that was separating itself from this liquid. And I'm looking at it and videotaping this, and I looked at the ceiling to think maybe a pipe had broken, and the ceiling was whitewashed. And I said to him, I said, "What, did a pipe break in the basement?" He said, "No, this just appeared." And I'm looking at it, and we got a yardstick, so I took a bunch of photographs of it. And I said, "Do you have a tissue?" And he said, "Yeah." So I took a tissue, and I dipped it in it. And I just looked at him. I said, I don't know what to say. I think I've done all I can do here. He says, "Oh, I can't clean this up. I don't have time to clean it up. I don't know what it is." He said, "I got to go out in the fields. I got some work to do. So I don't know what I'm going to do." I said, "All right." So he left, and I left. And about 2 hours later, I got another phone call from him, and just 2 words. He said, "It's gone." I said, "What?" He said, "I came back from the field just a minute or two ago, and I looked in the room. It's gone." So I jumped back in the van and zoomed out there, and I have the videotape going as I walk in the door. And I walk through the door, and sure enough, it's vanished. And I have a video of him squatting down and rubbing his hand over. He said, "It was right here, wasn't it?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "What the heck?" He lifts up his hand, and all you can see in the video on his fingers, there's a very, very thin film of dust on his fingers. And I'm like, "What in the heck?" And my wife Carol was there, so she said, "I wonder if the samples that you took are still intact." And they were out in the car. She ran out there, and sure enough, they were still intact. Mm-hmm. So she, we just had no idea what was going on here, except something very strange. So, but the Gettysburg Battlefield Preservation Association is very well connected, and they took the samples, sent them to a forensics lab, and in Pennsylvania, and the results 3 weeks later came back. The liquid that I'd taken those photographs of and that I'd seen was blood, and the species was human.
Human blood.
All that blood, all that human blood just vanished. It was there. I mean, I got video of it.
Wow.
And the other interesting thing is that over in the corners of the room, stained for 150 some years, stained, is the original blood of the soldiers who had amputations in that room that Mrs. Lady could not remove. How much did she try and get that stuff up, and it just would not come up. Human blood doesn't come out of that.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much the strangest
Yeah.
Strangest, weirdest, maybe even scariest thing that's ever happened to me.
Well, just, and thanks to Carol, she's kind of like the driving force behind, the whole, both of you together to think of to do that because, gosh, just to see that, it was human blood, obviously. They don't want to be forgotten. They're going to manifest the way they can. And people don't quite understand the whole energy thing. A lot of times people ask me, well, how come I just saw a head? I mean, I had that personal experience. And it took me years to figure out, okay, well, that's all the energy he had to manifest. You also have a story about, I think it was a general, was it not? Where the head appeared to one person and then again later?
Right. Maybe the only person that we can actually identify, the only ghost that we can actually identify, and I believe it was the ghost of General Reynolds. Mm-hmm. It was out at the seminary, and Reynolds, of course, was the Union commander of the First Corps that arrived there about 10 o'clock in the morning of July 1st, 1863, and was shot in the back of the neck, the lower part of the skull, and killed virtually immediately. Became the highest-ranking Union officer to die in the battle, and they took his body then back to a place called the George House on Steinway Avenue. And if you draw a line, you realize that from where he was shot to the George House, it goes just about where this dormitory is on the Lutheran Theological Seminary campus. And it was a seminarian who got in touch with me. And he said, the weirdest story, he said something happened to me, just a month or so ago, versus years ago. And he said, he said, I was sound asleep in the dorm room. And I heard this scream from down the hall. It woke me up. It was so loud. And then I realized it was, it was 1 o'clock in the morning. He says, I realized it was my buddy. So I have no idea what he was doing, but I was too tired. I didn't want to get up and go find out. So I just went back to sleep. He said, about an hour later, I was awakened by an absolutely freezing cold room. And I thought I'd left the window open and the temperature had dropped. He said, and went to close the window, was closed. But when I looked across the room, I saw half of a man standing there. Mm-hmm. It just from the waist up. He said it was very weird. He said the guy had a dark face, a dark beard, and he was dressed in looked like a uniform. And he said he did everything he could. He prayed. He tried to command the person to get out. And finally, after a minute or two, he finally started to get out of bed to defend himself, and the image vanished. Well, a couple of days after that, he ran into his buddy that he heard scream, and he said, "What in the world were you goofing around, or what were you doing?" And the guy got real serious. He said, "No." He said, about 1 o'clock, middle of the night, he said, I woke up, and there was a head floating in my room, and he said it was just a head. And the guy said, "What did it look like?" He said, "Well, it had a dark beard, and it was kind of darkly, dark face." And basically, he described the same guy. So I brought a photograph of actually a couple of generals, and I showed the fellow who told me the story, and he picked out General Reynolds. He said that was the guy that visited me in my room. But as you point out, it was only a partial manifestation. Right. And I agree. I think it all depends on the kind of energy that they can borrow. Right.
Well, they get it from us. If they can't get it from equipment around, like batteries, we all know, batteries drain, this happens, the lights flicker. They're pulling energy. And I've learned, of course, they're all theories, but aren't they all, at this point, we can't, it's so hard to prove things. But I've been told that, if they haven't crossed, they're pulling energy from the lower vibrational things, like fear and, stuff like that, or the things around them, the energy things around them, toys, batteries, cameras, whatever. So if he was able to materialize in one form, only so much. Once he got all that fear, the guy's praying, he's going, get out. I mean, that's fear. That's adrenaline. Mm-hmm. Maybe it gave him enough energy to then manifest more to the next one.
That's a very good possibility. I agree with that. I also know that they do borrow energy from not only equipment but from us, mm-hmm. and maybe that may be the reason why I get so many stories coming from the Gettysburg College campus. My goodness. Mm-hmm. Young people have more energy than anybody, and especially on a Saturday night or a football game or whatever. So
and the sheer tonnage of electronic equipment. Everybody's got a laptop and a cell phone and lights and batteries all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the reasons why I get so many stories from Gettysburg College is because of that, all the energy that's there.
Isn't that where in Penn Hall, the elevator?
Correct.
Oh, please. I've told this story so many times. To hear it from you on my show would be amazing. Please tell it.
Okay, well, because there's also some follow-ups on that too, which
Fantastic.
I'll tell you. The original story came to me from a couple of friends that worked late. They were working late one night at Pennsylvania Hall. It's called Pennsylvania Hall now. Like in the time of the battle, it was old dorm because there were dormitories. There was one of 3 buildings on the Gettysburg College campus, and of course, all the large buildings in town, as the Union Army passed through town, and that became the rear echelon, all the surgeons then commandeered all the large buildings, churches, schools, and this particular building because it was just about the biggest one in the area. As for hospitals, we know that the operations went on in the lower floors because of the descriptions of the weird pyramids that people would see underneath the windows on the first floor that they couldn't identify until they got closer and they realized they were amputated hands and arms and feet and legs that surgeons had just tossed out the windows. The upper floors then were used for recovery. So fast forward to the 1980s, and the 2 women that I knew were working late one night. It was about 11 o'clock because Pennsylvania Hall then became the administration building mm-hmm. for Gettysburg College. They decided to pack it in, and they got in the elevator, pressed the button for the first floor, which is the exit, started going down the elevator, went past the first floor, down towards the basement. She's going, oh my goodness, what is going on? They're pushing the first floor button to try and get to go back up. Kind of going up the elevator into a hall. The doors opened, and they looked out into a scene that's just completely out of time and out of any kind of reason. It was a hospital scene that they saw, a Civil War hospital scene. They saw men around leaning up against wounded men, bleeding men leaning up against the walls. They saw a table, the makeshift operating table in the middle of the room, a surgeon with a bloody apron. They started to panic. They had no idea. They were panicking. They didn't know what was going on. They're pressing the buttons. Nothing would move. Apparently a young man, an orderly, which sounded like their description to me, came around the corner and was no more than 2 feet from the door and looked at them and pleaded basically with his eyes, either let me get on there with you or get out of this scene that I've been in forever, or come out here and help me.
Help me.
They did not want to do,
Yeah.
Finally, the doors closed and the elevator went up. They ran immediately to the security office to report this. And I interviewed the security officer that was on. He later became head of security at Gettysburg College. He said, I remember that. I remember them calling. They were scared to death. And so we went over, but I figured it was a fraternity, playing a prank. And I figured there's no way they're going to clean up the mess they described. So we got back on the elevator, and this is within a minute or two, went all the way down, opened the doors, and the basement was pristine. It was all whitewashed walls. The cages where they kept all the supplies and equipment for the college over there. And he said, in fact, and I've seen this. I've been down in there. Not 10 feet from the door is a cinder block wall, which was whitewashed, and all the electrical equipment, all the electrical outlets and boxes are on that. So there was nobody to arrest, nobody to blame for this. They just went back up to the first floor and left. Now the interesting part is that this is in the mid 1980s. I was doing an autographing at Gettysburg College bookstore, and a couple came in, and a guy said, I knew that woman that happened to. Mm. I said, oh, you mean you knew such and such? He said, no. I said, well, then you knew such and such? No. I said, wait a minute. And he gave me a completely different name. The situation was that, not that she was working for the college, she was working for a firm that was auditing the college. They were all on the upper floor, and they asked her to go down to the car and get some paperwork. She got on the elevator, went down, and exactly the same thing happened. The same vision happened to her. I called her up. She eventually moved to Denver, and I interviewed her, and her description was exactly the same. Exactly the same.
Did she have any eye contact with it? Did anybody kind of recognize her in the same type of way? Did you know
I'm going to have to look over my notes, but I believe that when the doors opened to the elevator, she got a response.
Okay.
From the surgeon or from someone else that looked that way.
Right.
It's my impression that that's what happened. But
that is the one part of that story. I mean, the whole thing is amazing, without a doubt. But of course, I'm going to look at it from an empathic, sensitive, intuitive, mediumistic kind of way. If you know what I mean, I'm just looking at it in a different way. That one is always I just want to say broke my heart, because I'm thinking, okay, first of all, what did he see? When that elevator came down and opened, did he see in his eyes, two women coming to help, rip bandages and that kind of thing? Did he see two angels to him? Did he see, from his perspective, did he see what they actually looked like too, like a rip in time, and just pleading for help? The energy down there, of course, every house in Gettysburg just about was used for a hospital of some sort. I'm sure that was as well. And my thing is, how long is that guy going to go through this? Is it just him and that's his perception? Is it everybody, a collective mass? Is it residual with intelligent? I mean, the questions just bombard my head when I think about this story.
Definitely more questions than answers, that's for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, now I'm the kind of nutter that would say, okay, I'm going to sit in the basement, with some dowsing rods. I don't even want to record it. I'm just so not interested in that. I mean, it would be nice to have the recording, but I just feel like all that equipment kind of puts them off. Just go in there and go, look, I'm a human being. I'm here with this intent. Let me help you. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that'll probably work.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing we were saying in the beginning too, Mark. Is, I've heard you say that you've gotten great EVPs, or a friend of yours did, on a SpongeBob SquarePants recorder.
Yes. Right.
I know, but there's so a lot of these young people that are, genuinely interested, and of course, they're so smart. I mean, they grew up in this tech. You and I are of the, time where, you could make a phone call for a dime from a telephone booth that doesn't even exist anymore. I mean, tech has changed so much in our lifetime.
Right.
But sometimes the simplest things work. I can honestly tell you, I have stood in that field. Now, it's hard. My thing was, it was Halloween night in Gettysburg, and it was odd because they didn't celebrate it. I expected to see like Mardi Gras, but the streets were very quiet. There was ghost tours and everything else. I think they celebrated it on a different evening. There was actually more security than there were people in the street, if you know what I mean. Of course, there would have to be. I can't imagine what it's like for, from that side of it. You were on that side of it as a guard and security. But to stand on that field and you just have a small little flashlight and you've got the dowsing rods and you come in and you say, read my intent. I'm here to speak with you. I'm not going to ask you impertinent questions and use up your energy. Please excuse me for, I figured I was insulting them just by wearing pants, if you know what I mean.
Sure, yeah, they would, react to that.
But yeah, and I did, and I apologized. And I said, look, I was a soldier. You were a soldier. I said, I know I don't look like one. I happen to have my 2 sons with me. They were born in Alabama, and I was born in New Jersey. So I took that approach. I said, look, what you've done here has not been forgotten. Somewhere along the way, we all came together. And I was starting to get responses. You know where I was standing? And maybe you can tell me a little bit about I'm sure there's many battles there, but there's the high school. I think it's a high school. And there's a football field, and then there's a field. There's a huge witness tree. It's right if you walk out of Farnsworth and walk across the street.
Right.
Okay. And then you can stand by the witness tree and look out, and you can see the beginning of what looks like a dirt path, a trail that's pretty much chained off. You're not supposed to go there, but that's where I was. Can you tell me a little bit about the battle there? I've heard so many things. I'm sure there were skirmishes and stuff like that, but what exactly kind of went on around that tree? Let's see if it matches up with what they told me.
If you were looking down that pathway, you were probably on the road there, and right behind you would have been East Cemetery Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Down the road a little bit, the Macadam Road, the paved road. Across that area was the charge of the Louisiana Tigers.
Okay.
And they made it all the way up to the top, hand in hand, with the gunners of the batteries, artillery that were up there, and then were eventually driven back. So that whole area where the stadium was and all that whole area was fought over and advanced across by Confederate troops. Mm-hmm. And so that would have been the historic underpinnings of that place. The witness tree, of course, all the it's not just the trees. I mean, we do have witness trees there, but I mean, you have the earth itself, the rocks. Many of the rock walls were there at the time. So the potential to tap into another layer of time is there.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what I felt, because you could feel a change from the street to, now again, we're talking about feelings, and unfortunately the past 15 years they almost took the feeling out of it. If you're going by television shows and things like that, and I understand why they did that. They wanted to take a more scientific approach, but I think now we're starting to meld them together the way they should be, little at a time. And I know you're trying to do that as well. You started that years ago. But basically that was it, Mark. I'm walking, and the only way I could get there was to go on a tour, because otherwise I would have been in cuffs. But well, at that night, Halloween night, for Pete's sake, it's 12 o'clock Halloween night. But basically I'm walking, and I took the dowsing rods, I took the EMF meter, and I just kind of walked. And as soon as it started to light up, I set it down, and I just went with what I was feeling, because there's so much. It feels like you have that lead blanket on you, just if you're any kind of empath or have a heart at all, the heaviness, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And I just stopped. I took the dowsing rods out, and I said, okay, is there someone here who's willing to talk to me? Yes. They knew what was going on. I mean, they've seen equipment every hour on the hour. I did my apologies, my intent, and whatever, and I look up, and I promise you they were sitting in the tree. Because if you think about it, the tree has changed slightly over time. It's grown. But that wood hedgerow, right. You've got the buildings, you've got the lights, you've got everything else. They basically told me they were sticking to that because that hadn't changed much, and they were grouping up there. Around that tree and the wood line. Do you see what I mean?
Sure.
And they were absolutely intelligent, and just the feeling and everything they were getting. And as you're talking to them, it's almost like that overused term, ghost whisperer. You're talking to them like human beings. You're being not rude. You're just saying, okay, look, let me explain something. Have you seen this? And, have you seen things change? So it seemed to them, from that group, they did sometimes see things change. They were over the fact that people come in and ask, because we don't answer. They come in there, and they didn't use the word rude. They used the word, gosh, I wish I could remember, but my brain just went mush. It was basically, they were saying, they come here and are yelling at us. Why would we, this is,
Sure.
crazy. And they were just very agitated, but they calmed down in just a very few minutes, when they just kind of read your intent. People don't realize a lot of this is telepathic. If you can pick up their energy, they can pick up yours. So I think that's why you get a lot of response. I know you've gotten some great EVPs by just doing that, speaking to them like you would, just any person on the street, a little respect. So now as far as EVPs go for you, what have been some of your favorites? Was it like Mississippi, or my favorite is Heaven. That's my favorite.
Oh yeah. That was interesting. That was out at the Railroad Engine House, and Rob Conover was there. He is a Midwestern medium. And that was interesting, too, to bring him to Gettysburg. It's the first time he'd ever been to Gettysburg, and I was going to take him on a brief battlefield tour. We get out to the first day's battlefield, and he just froze. He just shut down. I said, Rob, are you all right? He goes, no. I said, what's the matter? He says, they're everywhere. They're all over here, and they're all suffering. I said, do you want to leave? He says, yeah, absolutely. So we got him out of there because it was just too much for him because he was so sensitive. But when we got him to the Railroad Engine House, then later on that evening, he said that he he was hearing a soldier who was he was like a lay preacher. And he was talking. He would go around and provide comfort to the men in the unit that he was in. And Rob finally said, you don't have to stay here. You're not stuck here. Let me help you cross over. He said, now just look. And he went through the whole thing. He said, just look. You'll see people and this and that and friends and everything. He said, what do you see? And I'm recording this whole thing, and all of a sudden you hear a voice go, Heaven. So, and it was almost, and the way he said it, it was almost like it was a confirmation. All of a sudden he realized what I've been preaching to these fellows about all this time is available to me. And so he moved on. But we got that twice, as a matter of fact, him saying Heaven.
Beautiful.
But that's a good bit of EVP that I got. Plus the Mississippi, when I asked in the basement of the Cashtown Inn, which was a Confederate hospital, one of my mediums said, "There's a soldier who would like to talk to you." See, I can't hear them. Okay, so I need help.
Yeah.
I'm not intuitive enough to actually hear, or sensitive enough to actually hear them. So that's why I work with mediums, and they say there's a fella here by the name of Andrew, and he would like to talk to you. And so basically, I just said, Andrew, what state are you from? And I heard 4 distinct syllables: Mississippi.
Wow.
And I really don't have to play that more than twice to any group before. Some people get it the first time. Most of them get it the second time.
Right. And that's why it's important, too, to think, a lot of the people out there going, wow, do I need to buy $2,000 equipment? And I think it's wonderful. There's so many things out there I don't understand how they work. And then there's some that's more, simpler, like the white noise. You've got the obelisk, you've got the, REM pods, you've got, gosh, look at the stuff, And
right.
I've heard more valid evidence from this most simplest things. Like you say, you can't hear them. In most cases, I can't. Now, you're standing in the middle of that battlefield. You stand in the middle of a wheat field and try to decipher the different entities that are there. The wheat field is just so overwhelming. I think I slept for 2 days when I got out of the wheat field, because there's just so much energy. Everything that happened there was horrible. The hogs, the screaming for your buddy to come and get you, and you can't move. You can't climb back over the fence or the rock, whichever side you were on, to come and get that person. People get desensitized, and they don't realize what these individuals went through. It's hot. It's July. You're wearing wool. You know, that's enough right there. Most people I know today couldn't get through a day of just that, let alone going through what they went through. The overall stench must have been, you know what I mean? You've got that many people in amount of town. You know, it's just you know, just the normal stuff you don't think about. You've got all the horses. You've got the you know the dead and dying. It's, you know, it's what was it, like 90 something degrees?
It was in the high 80s. It was in the 80s to high 80s, yeah.
And it's hot.
And it was, as you said, it was summertime. Sure, it was July. Horses, you know, were killed, and that's, you know, 1,000 pounds of meat that's out there rotting in the sun. Not to mention all the limbs that were amputated, all the men that were in essence gutted when you're shot in the stomach. You know what's in your stomach. That all comes out.
Well,
not to mention the fact that
there was a mini ball too, and those things didn't play. You hold one of those things in your hand, and you wonder why you get shot in the arm. Why these people had to get their arms and legs amputated because they couldn't. The bone was crushed. It was shattered. Sure.
Well, one of the things also that I mention in at least one of my books and upcoming book is about how much energy was released when a man, you know, the bones will create, if they are cracked or broken, they create piezoelectricity. So that's a burst of energy right there. How many bones were broken when men were shot? You know, I mean, there were at least 51,000 casualties, so that's 51,000 times over where they were hit, and very rarely did they miss a bone. You know, if you're shot in the chest or in the stomach or arm, leg, whatever, those bones cracked. That released energy. We also know that the dying release a burst of photons. They aren't visible. It's not visible light. It's in a different spectrum. But when we die, when the DNA unravels, there is first a burst of light, and then continuing a release up to 3 or 4 days of energy from a body that absolutely has no it's clinically dead, and they're still releasing energy as the DNA unravels, and so this energy was being released on the battlefield for days and days and days afterwards. Where did it all go? As we know, energy doesn't vanish. It doesn't disappear. It just changes form. Not to mention the fact that you had so many things there that would actually could capture energy, especially electromagnetic energy. Capacitors, we call them capacitors now. They store energy. They store electrical energy, and they are made out of everything from air to wood to earth to plastic to, you know, just about everything will hold electricity, and especially quartz, which, as you know, is basically the master crystal. Yep. And we've been using quartz watches for however long we've, you know, needed them for getting fine watch pieces. Timepieces. So there's so much there, and of course granite has quartz, and we see granite all over the battlefield. So granite contains quartz, and people think I'm crazy when I say that, but I say, well, wait a minute, what's holding all those gigabytes of memory in your computer? Silicon. You know, it's quartz, basically, your silicon chip in your computer. Now, the question is, how do we get the environment at Gettysburg or other battlefields, how do we get it to release this energy, which it seems to do spontaneously? Yes. How do we get to have it happen at our command? so that then we can study it whenever we need to. And now we have replication, which is part of the scientific method. You can do it like in a lab whenever you want.
Right.
And the laboratory just happens to be Gettysburg or any number of battlefields in America.
Well, that's absolutely true. I just walked through Fredricksburg, and you also have, don't you have a ghost tour there or something there? Is it Fredericksburg?
Yeah, we had a tour of Fredericksburg for a number of years, and then it got to be where it was a little bit too difficult, so we went virtual with it, and then finally we just gave it to our number one guide down there, and she's running it still, the same stories, the same tour and everything. So we're not in it, but we endorse it, the one down at Fredericksburg. And of course, Fredericksburg had 4 major battlefields. Fredericksburg was kind of like the hub. The 4 major battlefields: Chancellorsville, the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, and Fredericksburg itself. So there's plenty to see and visit down there if you're doing it for the history or if you're doing it for the paranormal.
It's a wonderful tour. You go in, you see the movie first, which kind of I was all for, because it puts you in the mindset before they release you out on the field, and you walk out with a different reverence. If you know what I mean, after you do that. And it was just amazing. And I can't mention Fredericksburg without mentioning the Angel of Maria's Heights. Do you know the story?
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit? Well, I think it's important for the listeners because, again, we're trying to keep in mind that these were human beings and a different type of human being 150 years ago, how they could do the things they did. Tell us a little bit about the Angel of Maria's Heights.
Okay, there was and I'm going to get his name here. For some reason, I can't recall it.
And now I can't.
That's okay.
It just left. Was it Henry? Wow.
No.
Let me Google
I'll get it here in a second.
Are you Googling?
I'm Googling it.
You go.
And his name was Richard Kirkland.
Kirkland, that's right.
And I think I've absorbed too many historic names in my lifetime to get that right off the top of my head, but I knew it. At any rate, Richard Kirkland was a soldier, Confederate soldier, who was stationed behind the Confederate line there at the sunken road behind the wall. He's from South Carolina, and he, as you know, the Union soldiers assaulted that wall. They never got within 20 or 30 yards, and they were just mowed down because the Confederates were so well protected. And assault after assault after assault, they lost some 4,000 men, casualties in just an hour of attacking. And every time they receded, of course, they left the wounded out there. And as soon as you're wounded, you get really, really, really thirsty. And these men were crying and calling for help and calling for water. And this just got to Kirkland, and he just absolutely couldn't stand it anymore. So he gathered up as many canteens as he possibly could get from his comrades, and they weren't sure what he was going to do. They were worried about him because he was going to go out there and help the enemy, and they were like, "They're going to kill you." And he climbed over the wall and walked out to the first soldier he had could reach, and he started giving him water. And the Union soldiers that were still in the lines saw this, and they were not going to shoot him. And they saw what he was doing, and he got the nickname the Angel of Maria's Heights. And I guess one of the I don't have it in front of me, but I believe the inscription on his statue, they built a statue for him down there because he was and it said a soldier, Confederate soldier of sublime compassion. And I always thought that was, he basically went on a suicide mission, but no one shot him. Later on, sadly, he was killed at Chickamauga. And, he was killed there.
But that there gives the listeners a little bit of insight into the intestinal fortitude of the American soldier. South, Union, or to today. You know, it's absolutely amazing what these individuals went through. I mean, right to the point of stopping the fighting at night and trading tobacco for molasses across the fences. You know, brother against brother, cousin against cousin, family against family. And a lot of people have asked me too, why do you think there's so much there? And I said, I think that's it. That's it. It's not just the sheer tonnage of death and destruction that went on and the energy there, but it was also the emotional value of what they were going through and the time and the belief, the religious beliefs. You know, what was the religions back? It was Lutheran, and, you know, they were all very black and white. You know, if you were bad, you know, you did anything bad, you weren't going, you know, to a good place. You were going to a bad place. And I actually, when I was speaking to one of the ones right there in that field, it's basically the feeling I was getting was, I've seen hell. I don't need to see more of it. You know, there's no way we're going to go after what we've done here. There's no way we're going to go cross over. So I think that's a huge amount. And that's just a small percentage of the ones that you can get to that point where you can talk to them, because they're so erratic and repeating over and over again. They're suffering. They're still going through, you know, they're still marching. You've got the Ghost Regiment, you know, which is probably a residual. Sure. Do you think that one is a residual? I mean, as far as much as you've heard, are they just repeating? It's on a loop? Or what do you think about that one?
Yeah, I think, you mean the Phantom, what we call the Phantom Regiment.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely think that is a residual.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because it replays over and over and over, and every description I've gotten, and I've gotten about 5 or 6, is virtually the same.
Right.
That they're a unit of soldiers out maneuvering. They appear. But the interesting part about the most recent one that I got, the most recent report, is that it was a family, a mother and a son, out on the battlefield there near the peach orchard.
Mm-hmm.
And her dog, they had the family dog with them, and they drove over the little hill there at the peach orchard, and they looked down in the field, and there was a unit of soldiers marching around, and they thought, my goodness, it must be a reenactment group practicing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the dog was in the back, and the dog was growling. The dog saw it too.
Wow.
And then a couple joggers came over the hill, and the whole unit vanished, just disappeared right before their eyes, and the dog quit growling. The dog, to me, is important because, you know, humans have a tendency to make up all kinds of excuses why they saw something out of the paranormal. You know, too much maybe to drink last night, like something under my contacts, whatever. Dog just reacted. He just alerted to that. And so that then is I think the important reason why I like to get, you know, stories that have dogs or animals reacting, because it's a unbiased source for the observation. And
I can tell you from experience, Gettysburg is a cat town. There's lots of cats and lots of dogs. And my son asked me, he goes, why do you think this? I said, well, you know, if I lived here, I'd be surrounded by cats and dogs because they're your best alarms, you know, for anything like that, you know, plus the fact they're just cool to have around. But that goes way back. You know, I mean, I almost think that people understood more 100 years ago than we do now in the paranormal, because they knew to have, you know, that they were alarms. You know, a cat and a dog can see things that we cannot see. You know, and I always tell people, pay attention. If your dog is barking at the corner and you've got a funny feeling, chances are, you know, go with your instinct. Yeah. Go back to the instinct, like you said in the beginning. We all are born with that intuition. And we talk ourselves out of it, or we just shut it down. Whatever we do, we all have that follow your gut thing. You know, animals have it, you know, with the fight or flight, and they don't talk themselves out of it. So if we could just get back to that feeling and that energy, is like if you have that feeling, then you're probably, you know, surrounded. And I think that's why Gettysburg, you can actually feel it, even in a moving car, as you get closer to it. there is an energy there. You know, a lot of people don't realize, you said a couple of times in your book about, you know, tourists will come and go, where's the battlefield? Well, you're standing in it.
Yeah. Right.
You know.
Well, you know, and the intuitive part of it is very important, and we're getting more and more into that. And I always wanted to have scientific proof. Well, I'm kind of getting it from the use of pendulums and dowsing rods.
Yep.
And just recently, I was out in Ohio, and where my family was from, and I was invited to do an investigation of a local theater. And my cousins still lived there, so we met there, and they had never done a paranormal investigation before. And my one cousin, I handed him a pendulum, and I said, "Go ahead and try and communicate. You don't have to talk. You can just ask some questions." And he was familiar with some of the people who had acted, because he's an actor, and he had acted in that theater and had passed on. And he got in contact with 3 of his personal friends, and you should have seen the pendulum going crazy. And he, you know, this is somebody who never used a pendulum before, and would not know how to manipulate it, you know, and he wasn't doing it for anybody because we couldn't even hear what he was saying. And he basically got very emotional when that happened. I've seen Carol take her dowsing rods and find graves out on the just, you know, as a couple places we've been to, they were graves that had been, bodies were exhumed, and you can see her walking along. The dowsing rods cross. She steps into a depression. She backs out of the depression, and they uncross. So yes. I'm a firm believer of what you have talked about in terms of the intuitive part of it.
I have a question that you can ask Carol. You would probably know. That night, when I did get about 7 to listen, it was, like I said, it was very, we'll have to talk. I'll have to come visit you again, and we'll just sit down. I'll buy you a cup of coffee or a beer, and we'll just talk about this. But the thing is I had to do it quickly, and it honestly wasn't a problem. Like I said, in 45 minutes, I got more than, 10 years of ghost adventures, because we were just going in with the right intent. And I honestly believe it has nothing to do with me, has nothing to do, there's some kind of a connection there, Mark. It's like, whatever you want to say, your spirit guides, your angels, maybe they connected with theirs. It was time. It was time, and I really can't explain that because I'm really nobody in this. I'm just a person with a heart. I know what it's like to be a soldier. I know what it's like to do your duty. I know what it's like to have to live with that. Maybe it was that energy they connected. I don't know. But,
well, it's that and the respect that you give these men, I believe.
Yes.
I think they know that having been a soldier, they know that you can empathize with them.
Well, that's it. And it took a little bit, I asked to talk to the highest ranking person there because I figured the rest would follow. That's just normal. And I got him to listen. I said, please read my intent. I'm not I'm not taking pictures. I wouldn't do that. I'm only using, the dowsing rods, whatever. I did have the EMF and a small flashlight that someone put at my feet because when they saw I was starting to get, but I asked everybody to stay away. No flashes, no pictures, no nothing. Respect, because I'm also Native American. We always got that thing where people are afraid of getting pictures because they feel like it took part of your soul. Have you ever heard that one?
Yeah, sure.
So it's possible they're, even thinking that. So whatever. At the end of it, after I got them, I tried to connect them into that love connection, which is hard because look what they just went through. Do you, think about your loved ones that you missed? You remember what it was like to have a hug because that's, that feeling. That connects you right in. And everything started to change. All the erratic, everything, all that energy just seemed to melt a little. And when it was all over, the dowsing rod, I felt this like warm, it's hard to explain, a warm wind. I'm sure you've kind of felt it. It's not really a wind, but it's definitely a change in the energy.
Right.
The dowsing rods start to cross like they were going to give me a yes, And they kept coming, and honestly, my first thought was, okay, it's reacting to this pull, this wind I'm feeling, this kind of a rush. And I'm watching them, and they're crossing, and they keep coming. And I'm wearing a heavy leather jacket. It's October. And they keep coming, and then they come up to my arms, and they squeezed. And I got a hug from a ghost on the Gettysburg battlefield on Halloween night.
Oh, wow, that's great.
And
great.
I was wondering if Carol ever got something like that, if she's trying to help her, tell her, to look for that, because I never heard about it before. And then I ran home and Googled, when I was all done. And it's happened before. Investigation lady crossed a young girl, and she was using dowsing rods. And before she crossed over, she gave her a hug with the dowsing rods. I've heard it a couple of times. So you can get stuff with that kind of equipment that you just can't get. It's hard to get a hug from an ovilus, and it's hard to get, you know what I mean? You can get a thank you.
Exactly.
But isn't
exactly. I'll have to ask her. I don't recall her ever saying that. I know that she's asked the dowsing rods, can you, whoever's operating the dowsing rods, can you point to the other energy in this room? And you see the rods just go to one side or the other, and point to another area of the room. So that's your intuitive, hands-on type stuff. But I don't know about getting a hug. I've been tapped. I've had my sleeve pulled on investigations, but never. I don't believe I've ever been hugged.
Well, go in there with the dowsing rods.
Yeah, okay.
But I mean, it seemed to me they found a way. And it was just so overwhelmingly. I'm telling you, it wasn't a dry eye standing around, because I made everybody stand off to the side. I said, look, I'm serious. I'm a 5'2" redhead, and I'm a Jersey girl, and I just went in there and look, I'm here on a mission. Back off. But it was time. Just like the poor guys in the cellar, at Penn Hall, asking for help. I'm telling you, Mark, you name the date, and I'll come and sit in the cellar with you. I'm there.
Okay.
I am so there.
We have to get permission to do that.
Oh,
and,
yeah, I can imagine.
I do have a couple contacts left at Gettysburg College. I mean, you can visit down there, but you can't,
right.
You can't stay down there without permission. But
right.
We'll see.
Well, you never know. I mean, and I have a theory. I have nothing to hold it up, but it could just be that one guy that's making that connection. And he's manifesting. This is what I'm seeing. This is what, that takes so much energy, but my gosh, he's down there with all the electric and stuff, is he not? So he might be able to pull that off. I don't know. So many questions.
Well, that's where a lot of the electrical boxes, the junction boxes, are all right there in front of the, at least in the current day now. Of course, they vanished. All that vanished when the individuals had the experience. So,
wow, it's just wow. Question marks all over the place on that one. Now,
more questions than answers.
It's the paranormal onion. The more you peel, the more more layers you get. It's fascinating. It's so fascinating, and I know that you have used some of the knowledge you've acquired to even do a different kind of investigation into crime scenes and things like that.
Right. Yeah,
wow.
That was one of the, Catherine Ramsland, a dear friend of mine and co-author, she herself has written 60-some books. She's a professor of forensics at the Sales University, and also was a consultant on Bones, CSI, and the new program, The Alienist, in terms of forensics. And she came up with the idea, and I guess it's sort of a new idea, but it's based on the fact that when CSIs run out of evidence, they've gone to all the trace evidence and everything. When they run out of evidence, can you call in the PFIs, in other words, paranormal forensic investigators, to use their methods? A whole team of not necessarily psychics, psychics might be involved, but a whole team. Because as you know, everybody seems to have their own specialty. Some people are better with dowsing rods, others are better with EVP, others are better with photography. To use those skills to gather some more data and evidence from the other side to perhaps keep the investigation moving ahead into this particular crime. So we've been actually having weekends that we pick a crime. We don't tell anybody what the crime is until they get there in Gettysburg, and then tell them the crime and get them information that they can use to investigate the crime with paranormal methods, using, for example, getting EVP from victims or witnesses that have gone on, psychometry, where they hold an item that's associated with the crime, remote viewing, where they actually view the scene of the crime, even in the past. You can do that. And those are the types of things that help us gather more data and perhaps, make keep the unsolved crime active again. So that's what those weekends are about.
I think that's awesome because we know for a long time, police and investigators have used psychics, but they keep them on, the down low. They'll say, yes, okay, well, here's some evidence. Go back and check that evidence again because, the person is saying this. We also know that it's very hard for a psychic detective or a psychic person to say, okay, well, she showed up in my kitchen and I know where the body's buried, because they get locked up. At least for a while. It happens. It's happened multiple times, because, well, how do you know the body,
Exactly, yeah.
So that happens, but I think they're opening a little more to it. Again, in our lifetime, we've seen some huge changes in that department too. So what have you found? What were some of your favorite things that since doing this part of it?
Well, we have, let's see, how can I officially investigated one crime. I really can't get into too much because we may use the crime again. But what happened is that we did get in contact with the victims and found out that the perpetrator, it was also a suicide after he had done this, he killed himself, was still intimidating the victims, his victims, into silence. For a while, I was getting EVP from the victims, and then all of a sudden, he showed up. I apparently asked the wrong question. He showed up, and that was it.
Okay.
The EVP stopped. And then eventually what happened is that over actually the course of 3 of these weekends, one of our mediums, Patty Wilson, who is also a co-author of mine, attempted to cross over the victims. She was successful.
Good.
And the perpetrator was very, very angry and would not cross over. She tried to cross him over too, but he was having none of it. So that's one of the things that we've run into. We do have other crimes that we've kind of been investigating. One I can mention because it may be a while before we get into it, is the crime made famous by the movie and book Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil.
Okay.
The crime that was down in Jim Williams, down in Savannah, Georgia. And so we've been in contact with some of the victims, the victim of that crime, Danny Hansford. So that may be the next one we do, but
you found out so much in that one thing, Mark. If you look at it, I have been in situations where the very same thing happened, where you're trying to help one and you're communicating with one, and she's saying, "Hurry because he's coming." And who's coming? And then you have to decipher what's going on. I've actually been in situations where it took almost like 3 mediums to kind of hold that one back, and how they did it, I couldn't tell you. I'm not privy to that ability. while, you're trying to communicating with this other one to get them connected, because you're trying to connect them into those higher vibrational things, the love, the light, and all that, just so they can see the light again. Meanwhile, this one's trying to keep them in the negative, lower vibrational stuff. So you're going to fight that. It's so wild, but we know that they can be in the same house and be aware of each other, and they can be in the same house and not be aware,
Right.
So the fact that you're talking to them, and it seemed to me when you were telling it that once you connected into, even whether you spoke it or whether you connected in telepathically to that spirit's energy, he showed up.
Right.
Wow.
Well, when we started asking questions that he didn't want the victims to give the answers to, that's when he shut them down. And very, very intimidating individual. And young victims. So it was interesting.
Yeah. What amazing. But you're finding ways to use this, and I just got to say I'm so proud of you, because you've gone through all of this, and you've really touched on quite a lot of different vantage points of it. I mean, from being a guard, from being this, and then an author, and you're listening to the stories and you're putting them all together, and then you've kind of got it down to that, the investigator part of you is taking that and taking it to another level. And I think a lot could be learned. You have a couple books on investigation. You want to name those just for people that are interested in doing that?
Sure. Well, along with the 7, soon to be 8 volumes of Ghosts of Gettysburg, there's also the Ghost Hunter's Field Guide, Gettysburg and Beyond, which is basically a how-to, where-to. If you want to do a paranormal investigation at Gettysburg, it tells you basically how to do it, and also how to or where to do it. In other words, places not only on the park, but in the town itself, and places where you can go and stay there all night. So that's a interesting book. And the other one has to do with Fredricksburg and Chancellorsville, which is our other. We have our tours, or had our tours, and it's Ghost Hunter's Field Guide to Civil War Battlefields. Basically the same thing, how to, where to.
Well, it's kind of indispensable, because there are places in Gettysburg that they're just so tired of this kind of mess. They're not going to let you on. You're going to wind up seeing a security guard before you see a ghost. So
correct.
You definitely want to take that into account, but I can tell you, if you just want to go and pick up the feeling, definitely take the tour through, walk up Little Round Top, sit there, be quiet, just sit on a rock, listen to the wind through the leaves, and I guarantee you, if nothing else, you're going to feel it. When you look down and wasn't it Boys from Alabama were coming up, fighting to get up those rocks and, get pushed back down. I don't know how you feel about the movie Gettysburg. Were you involved in that at all? Were you a consultant, or were you?
I was not, but I got letters from participants, the reenactors, explaining some ghost stories that had happened, some paranormal experiences that they had while they were in uniform, and helping to film it.
Absolutely. I can imagine, because there they were, and they could connect into that. I know you've had a lot of experience too with people when you wear a uniform, and you're trying to communicate, you get a little bit better of a reaction and things like that. So there's so many aspects to this. And I just really think that you have a fresh look, and so many, like I said, vantage points to look at it, and you're taking it to that next level. And I look forward to what's coming next with you. I just love the whole crime scene investigation, everything. Before, I know we've taken up so much of your time, Mark, and I'm so glad you came on this side of the gate to give us a little more insight. Would you tell everybody one time before we let you go how to contact you and a little bit about your tours and all?
Yeah, well, the tours are going 7 days a week now, and they will be continuing all the way into November. So I think what people need to do is make the reservation or contact us through ghostsofgettysburg.com. That's plural ghosts, not just one. Ghostsofgettysburg.com. And that's the way to find out what's going on in Gettysburg, when I'll be autographing at our shop there, and how to make a reservation, or at least get the phone number and call and find out more information. So that's the main thing on the computer.
Great. Can they get the books through there as well, or?
We have an online bookshop, actually you can get T-shirts or hats or whatever you want, but the books are available online. Once again, ghostsofgettysburg.com.
I'm looking at it right now. It's a fabulous site, and it's a great shop. And like I said, I've been in there a couple of times to speak to you, and it's always a wonderful experience. And I just thank you so much for giving us so much of your time today. I think it was a wonderful conversation, and I could go on for hours. But I'm definitely going to have you back on again. Will you come back?
Sure.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Sysco, for having me.
Thank you again to Mark Nesbitt for spending so much time with us. It was a wonderful conversation. And thank you to his wife, Carol, for getting all that together. Also, if you have your paranormal stories or stories of your bump-ins with the uncanny, please email us at journeythroughthegate@gmail.com. Connect in with us on our Facebook discussion page, Journey Through the Gate Paranormal Portal Podcast, The Gatekeepers, where you can discuss your experiences or help someone else who's had one. Now, as always, keep your feet under the covers. Keep that closet door shut, because there are things that go bump in the night.